They say quiet neighborhoods hide the loudest secrets, but nobody in Georgia could have imagined this. Picture the scene. It's just before sunrise, families still asleep, children tucked in their beds, when suddenly the silence explodes into chaos. Flashbangs erupt, windows shake, and in the middle of it all, federal agents swarm the street. But what left everyone stunned wasn't just the early morning raid. It was what the FBI claimed they were up against. Reports are flying that members of a powerful cartel didn't just have handguns or rifles. No, these men were allegedly armed with something that belongs on a battlefield. A grenade launcher. Yes, you heard that right. Fans of true crime and drama alike can't believe it. Social media lit up within minutes. Neighbors said they were frozen in fear, and whispers spread that this wasn't just any bust. It was an all-out confrontation between
office. The FBI and SWAT were outside this home around 6 o'clock in the morning. The FBI posted these pictures to their Facebook account, saying agents were out arresting gang members as part of Operation Summer Heat.
We found 2 weapons in this apartment complex where we found these pills. There are children and adults and several innocent people that live
between the FBI and cartel leaders who believed they were untouchable. Emotions ran high as sirens wailed, doors were kicked open, and suspects were dragged out in handcuffs. The question...
A major gang crackdown. Tonight, the FBI says it arrested 17 alleged gang members in connection to a violent drug trafficking ring out of Athens.
Just this morning, the FBI's Atlanta office joined the Safe Streets.
Racing through everyone's mind now. How deep does this go? And how did such weapons end up on American soil? Morning in Georgia began like any other, a quiet neighborhood. Families getting ready for school, some still tucked in bed, others sipping their first cup of coffee. Everything looked ordinary, but behind the calm there was...
On camera, he tells me law enforcement kicked in his downstairs door and arrested a person living with him. When I asked why, he didn't...
There was a storm waiting to explode. Without warning, the silence was shattered by the thunder of flashbangs. Windows rattled, alarms went off, and in an instant, the street was filled with the kind of...
You'll hear occasional yelling, and there's times where cops just pull up for them, and I have no idea.
Chaos no one ever expects to see outside their door. SWAT teams dressed head to toe in black gear stormed the houses as terrified neighbors peeked through curtains, unsure if they were witnessing a movie scene or a nightmare come alive. This wasn't just another police raid. Rumors were already spreading that the suspects inside weren't small-time dealers
across the county.
Kevin McCook is the sheriff of Jackson County. He says law enforcement hit about 3 different houses targeting gang members.
So we're not just hitting random people. We're not just like pulling the slot machine hoping we get something. No, there's a background information that's done. A lot of legwork is done in
or petty criminals. Whispers said this was a full-fledged cartel ring, the kind of group you'd expect to see ruling distant border towns, not renting homes in suburban Georgia. But what stunned everyone wasn't just their presence. It was what they were allegedly armed with. Not pistols, not rifles, not even shotguns. Reports claimed they had a grenade launcher. Imagine the horror of parents clutching their children while hearing that just a few doors down, men had stockpiled weapons powerful enough to turn the entire street into a battlefield. Fear spread like wildfire and social media lit up with disbelief. Neighbors still...
And our thanks to Chase for that report. Now, the FBI says during the raids they found a grenade launcher, close to $1 million in drugs and...
Still shaken, repeated the same question. How did this even end up here? Officers with loudspeakers demanded the suspects come out, but silence echoed back. Then the battering ram struck, and the front door burst open. Smoke and shouting filled the air, and within minutes, one man was dragged outside in handcuffs. His face was calm, almost cold, as if he had known this moment would come. Neighbors whispered to each other, wondering how long this had been happening right under their noses. Some admitted they had seen strange cars arriving late at night. Others recalled hearing music blasting or muffled
business.
Tonight, a sprawling law enforcement operation in Athens and Atlanta.
Local and federal officers teaming up to bust what they call a drug trafficking.
Muffled screams, but no one thought to report it. Now, standing in the middle of chaos, they realized those small signs were pieces of a much inside. Agents uncovered a scene that felt like something out of a crime drama. In one hidden basement, they discovered bags stacked neatly on shelves. When they were opened, powders and pills spilled out.
26 kilos of cocaine, 1.7 kilos of fentanyl, meth, cash, as well as more than 24 weapons. That includes 26 guns and a grenade launcher. We're told the grenade launcher was seized in Jefferson.
The kind that could devastate entire communities. One officer.
15 law enforcement agencies all played a role in 12 different search warrant raids today across Atlanta and in Athens. Police ultimately arrested 17.
Muttered to a colleague that the amount seized could wipe out thousands of lives if it reached the streets. The words chilled everyone who overheard them. Outside, one mother clutched her daughter tightly, her voice breaking as she told a reporter, "What if this had gotten out here? How could we ever protect our kids?" The suspects weren't silent either. One man, his wrists bound, shouted as he was escorted past flashing cameras, "You think you've won, but the real boss is still free." His words cut through the air, fueling rumors and sparking speculation. Was there someone bigger behind this? If these arrests were only scratching the surface, what monster still lurked in the shadows? That single statement sent shockwaves through the community. Suddenly, people weren't just worried about what was seized, but about what might still be hiding in plain sight. As investigators searched further, they came across an old notebook covered in smudged ink and strange codes. Flipping through the pages, agents exchanged quick glances and immediately sealed it as evidence. Speculation ran wild. Was it a ledger of deals, a list of contacts, or a blueprint of the entire network? The mere sight of it was enough to convince reporters that this bust was bigger than anyone imagined. Hashtags began trending online. Grenade launcher in Georgia, FBI vs. cartel. The raid had already become the story of the day, spreading far beyond the county lines. Neighbors who had lived in the area for decades said they felt.
In 2 suitcases, we found approximately 240,000 pills, which we
said they felt betrayed by what had unfolded. One elderly man, a veteran, told a reporter with trembling hands, "I survived."
Largest fentanyl bust in state history.
We seized approximately 24 kilograms of fentanyl in pill form.
Vietnam. But I never thought I'd see a grenade launcher in my own neighborhood. His voice cracked. And that single quote was enough to dominate primetime.
What he said.
We seized 5 kilograms of powder fentanyl.
5 kilos or 12 pounds contains potentially enough fentanyl to kill how many people?
2.5 million.
You can compare that to what?
Broadcasts. Across the nation, people watched in disbelief, horrified that such heavy weapons were being stored not in faraway war zones, but in family homes surrounded by picket fences and playgrounds.
We found 2 weapons. In this apartment complex where we found these fentanyl pills, there are children and adults and several innocent people that lived.
Press conferences followed, with officials insisting that everything was under control. But people weren't
A seizure in Sandy Springs featuring a frightening find and an affirmative field test for fentanyl, the deadly synthetic opioid. And if lab tests confirm suspicions, it's enough fentanyl in powdered form to kill about 2.5 million people. And in addition, a seizure of counterfeit pills, also suspected of containing fentanyl.
Convinced. On one side, law enforcement painted the operation as a success. On the other, frightened residents wondered how.
It was shocking. When we found that amount of fentanyl in our city, you can compare it to killing our entire population of the city of Sandy Springs.
And several other metro Atlanta cities.
How many more safe houses might be out there? Families of those arrested added their own layer of drama. One mother, crying outside the courthouse, insisted her son.
Someone with this quantity of fentanyl that we seized has direct connections to one of 3 cartels. Sinaloa Cartel, Jalisco New Generation Cartel, better known as CJ&G, or the Nueva La Familia Cartel. And we're confident that we'll be able to track this down.
Son was innocent, claiming he had been framed. Her tears drew sympathy from some, but others whispered that she must have known what was happening. Emotions ran high, and the community was split between disbelief, anger, and pity. One particularly tense moment. As officers loaded...
But the circumstances in this case lead him to believe most of the powdered suspected fentanyl and the pills would have been bound for Metro Atlanta streets.
The suspect had a lengthy criminal history that include violence with a firearm, drug trafficking, and also he was
confiscated weapons into evidence trucks. Reporters gasped when a long, heavy case was opened just enough to reveal the outline of the grenade launcher. Cameras zoomed in, capturing a blurred image that instantly went viral. To many, that image was the proof of just how far things had spiraled. The idea of cartel leaders stockpiling military-style weapons in Georgia wasn't just shocking. It was terrifying. Day turned into night, but the drama didn't end. Television pundits debated whether this was part of a larger network stretching into other states. Online forums buzzed with conspiracy theories. Some argued the arrests were just a performance. Others claimed this was proof that cartels had already infiltrated deeper into American society than anyone dared to admit. Whatever the truth was, one thing became certain. This was no...
were charged by a federal grand jury in the Northern District of Georgia with various crimes related to the manufacture, distribution, and importation of massive quantities of heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl.
No ordinary raid. It had exposed a hidden world, one that had been building in silence while families mowed their lawns and children played outside. The emotional weight of the day left scars on everyone involved. Neighbors confessed they didn't know if they could ever sleep peacefully again. Some packed bags, saying they planned to move away as soon as possible. The memory of sirens, flashbangs, and armed men shouting in the early morning hours would not be forgotten anytime soon. Even the officers, though victorious, carried a heavy expression, aware that this victory might only be temporary if larger forces were still operating in the shadows. And as the night quieted again, the silence felt heavier than before, filled with questions no one could yet answer. The night after the raid, the community could hardly rest. Whispers carried through the neighborhood like an echo that refused to fade. Some neighbors sat together in their driveways, trading stories, trying to piece together how such a terrifying operation unfolded in their quiet town. One man swore he had seen strangers dropping off heavy duffel bags late at night. Another woman said she heard what sounded like muffled shouting in Spanish just a few weeks earlier. Suddenly, every odd noise, every unfamiliar car, every flickering light from those houses seemed like a warning sign they had ignored. And that guilt only deepened the fear. While the investigation revealed shocking details. Inside one of the houses, agents found more than just piles of drugs. They uncovered hidden compartments beneath the floorboards where cash was stuffed into plastic containers. Bundles upon bundles of bills, tightly wrapped in rubber bands, stacked like bricks. By the end of the morning, nearly $1 million had been hauled out of that single property. To the reporters standing outside, it was like watching a vault being emptied. One officer whispered to another that this was only one small fraction of the fortune the cartel was moving through Georgia. If that was true, then just how much money was flowing through their entire network? But the most chilling discovery remained the weaponry. 26 firearms, rifles with scopes, pistols with custom grips, shotguns with extended magazines, and in the middle of them all sat the grenade launcher, still gleaming, like a ghost from a war zone. Officers lifted it carefully, their faces tight with unease. One officer muttered that if the suspects had even tried to use it, the entire block could have turned into a battleground. Hearing those words made reporters gasp, and neighbors stepped back in disbelief. It wasn't just drugs or cash anymore. It was the very idea that cartel leaders had the audacity to arm themselves in such a way on American soil. Evidence piled up. So did the speculation. Officials confirmed that the group arrested wasn't working alone. Their operations stretched far beyond Jackson County, reaching into Atlanta, Athens, and Sandy Springs. And just months earlier, police in Sandy Springs had stumbled on a staggering bust. 2 suitcases stuffed with nearly 240,000 pills, believed to be laced with fentanyl. Alongside those pills were almost 5 kilograms of powder, enough to kill millions if it had hit the streets. Officers said the find was the largest fentanyl seizure in Georgia's history. For the first time, people began connecting the dots. The raid in Jackson County wasn't isolated. It was part of a massive pipeline that stretched straight from Mexico to the southeast United States. Emotions only grew hotter when neighbors learned that many of those arrested had already served time for similar crimes. Yet somehow, through legal loopholes and early releases, they had returned to the streets and built their empire again. One frustrated father told the press, "We try to raise our kids right, but these criminals come back stronger every time. What hope do we have?" His words echoed across television screens, sparking debates about the justice system. Why were repeat offenders allowed back into neighborhoods where families lived? And then came the families of the suspects. Outside the courthouse, emotions boiled over. One sister screamed at reporters, insisting her brother was innocent, claiming he was only renting a room and had no idea what was happening around him. Another relative sobbed uncontrollably, saying her cousin was lured into the cartel lifestyle because of poverty. These pleas created a different kind of drama, one where families clashed with public outrage. The community wasn't sympathetic. Some neighbors openly accused the families of turning a blind eye. One elderly woman declared, "They knew what was going on. You can't live in a house filled with guns and drugs and pretend you don't see it." The comment divided opinion online, with some calling her brave and others saying she was too harsh. The case grew. Investigators revealed the names of the alleged leaders, Alicio Janes Pineda and Orlando Muckley. Prosecutors accused them of running operations that had funneled meth and fentanyl across multiple counties for years. One group reportedly used Commerce Parkway and Jennings Mill Parkway as their base, turning ordinary streets into trafficking corridors. Neighbors who heard these revelations were stunned. The idea that such dangerous operations had been quietly unfolding in familiar places made everyone uneasy. But the story didn't stop at local leaders. Whispers grew louder that higher powers were pulling the strings. Federal agents began pointing to La Nueva Familia Michoacana, one of Mexico's most ruthless cartels, notorious for extreme violence. Rumors swirled that two brothers, known for their cruelty and power, were orchestrating everything from across the border. Suddenly, this wasn't just a local raid anymore. It was a piece of a much larger chessboard, where Georgia was being used as a hub for international crime. News channels milked the drama, running special segments with dramatic music and bold headlines. Grenade launchers seized in Georgia flashed across screens, leaving viewers across the country stunned. Social media buzzed with memes, theories, and outrage. Some joked that the raid sounded like a Hollywood movie, while others worried it was proof the cartels were closer than anyone realized. One viral post read, "If they have grenade launchers here, what else are they hiding?" The post racked up thousands of shares and enforcement insisted they had taken control, but even their press conferences had a tone of unease. The sheriff of Jackson County told reporters, "This wasn't random. Months of surveillance, wiretaps, and lead work went into this. We knew what we were walking into." But his words didn't calm the public. Instead, they raised new fears. If the raid had been so carefully planned, it meant investigators had known about the cartel for months. Why had it taken so long to act? And if this group was caught, how many others were still operating in silence? Meanwhile, dramatic details leaked from inside the raid itself. One officer reportedly shouted, "Come out with your hands up," moments before the door was kicked in. Neighbors claimed they heard suspects yelling back in defiance. Though officials didn't confirm the exchanges, the image of cartel members challenging federal agents head-on added fuel to the fire. Commentators described it as a showdown, a battle of wills between law enforcement and men who thought themselves untouchable. The tension only deepened when officers revealed they had also confiscated ledgers and encrypted phones. Investigators suggested these might reveal the full scope of the network. Speculation ran wild about what secrets might be hidden inside. Names of accomplices, maps of distribution routes, or even ties to politicians or officials. Reporters spun theories late into the night, building suspense as if the entire state was caught in a crime. Drama cliffhanger interview. Families in the neighborhood confessed they felt like they were living in a season finale of a TV show. One teenage girl told a journalist, "It feels like our street was part of a gangster movie." "But this is our real life." Her words captured the surreal atmosphere. Nobody felt safe anymore. Even though the arrests were celebrated, the lingering thought was that more danger still lurked in the shadows. And through all this, the grenade launcher remained the symbol. Images of it circulated endlessly online, a grim reminder of how close the community had come to disaster. To many, it was proof that the line between foreign cartels and American neighborhoods had blurred beyond recognition. The days following the raids turned the entire state into a stage of speculation. Every news channel carried endless footage of flashing lights, suspects in cuffs, and boxes of evidence being hauled out of houses. Commentators described it as the most daring confrontation between federal agents and cartel members in recent memory. But what really ignited public fascination were the rumors about the masterminds. People wanted to know, if these 17 suspects were the foot soldiers, then who was truly pulling the strings? Prosecutors wasted no time unveiling the next layer of the drama. During a press briefing, they accused 2 men of directing the operations from the shadows. Their names, whispered with fear, were Alicio Janez Pineda and Orlando Muckle. Prosecutors claimed these men had built an empire stretching across counties, using ordinary neighborhoods as the front lines of their trade. The courtroom was packed when these names were mentioned, and the reaction was instant. Reporters scribbled furiously, families gasped, and one suspect's relative fainted upon hearing the charges. The prosecution painted a picture of betrayal and secrecy. They alleged that Pineda used his own relatives to move shipments of meth and fentanyl, hiding them inside cars, and sometimes even in furniture. Meanwhile, Muckle was said to have recruited friends from childhood, promising them quick money and protection. But once they were inside the circle, they found themselves trapped, unable to escape. One witness, speaking under anonymity, told investigators, "If you tried to walk away, they'd remind you of what they could do to your family." These chilling words were repeated on nightly broadcasts, fueling the image of a cartel that thrived. The courtroom drama didn't end there. Lawyers for the suspects fired back, accusing the government of exaggeration and fabrication. One defense attorney shouted, "This is all theater. My client is no kingpin." But the public wasn't convinced. Neighbors who had seen the raids with their own eyes believed the evidence spoke for itself. "How can you explain a grenade launcher under your roof?" one man said to a local reporter, his voice sharp with disbelief. Outside the courthouse, protests erupted. Some carried signs demanding harsher penalties for traffickers, while others claimed law enforcement was targeting immigrants unfairly. The clash of opinions became its own spectacle. Emotions ran high, and police had to set up barriers to keep crowds apart. Fans of crime dramas online compared it to a scene out of a TV series, where the line between truth and fiction blurred until nobody knew what to believe anymore. But just when people thought they had grasped the story, another twist landed. Investigators revealed they had traced connections not only to Pineda and Muckle, but also to La Nueva Familia Michoacana, one of Mexico's most feared cartels. Federal indictments had already been unsealed against 2 brothers from Mexico, infamous for running brutal operations with violence that shook entire towns. Prosecutors claimed the Georgia network was one of their many outposts. Hearing this, the audience watching from home realized the story had grown from a local raid into an international saga. Anchors spoke with urgency, repeating the brothers' names in hushed tones. One commentator said, "These are not just criminals, these are warlords." Their reputation in Mexico included brutal punishments, extortion, and even the use of weaponized drones. The idea that such figures had ties to operations in Georgia terrified viewers. Suddenly, the grenade launcher seized in Jefferson looked less like an anomaly and more like a deliberate symbol of cartel power crossing borders. While the officials talked about cartel bosses, families in Georgia continued to grapple with the emotional toll. One woman, whose cousin was arrested, cried outside her home, insisting he was only guilty of trying to support his children. Her neighbors, however, weren't sympathetic. One man snapped back, "Supporting kids doesn't involve poisoning an entire city." These tense confrontations spread across neighborhoods, dividing communities between sympathy for families and outrage at the damage done. Meanwhile, turned the case into a firestorm. Hashtags like Operation Summer Heat and Grenade Launcher Street trended. Influencers made videos breaking down the raids like plot recaps, with some dramatizing events using sound effects and reenactments. Millions tuned in, half horrified and half entertained. The spectacle turned tragedy into viral content, and while some criticized the sensationalism, others said it was the only way to make people understand the gravity of what was unfolding. In the midst of the chaos, more leaks emerged. Investigators hinted that encrypted phones had revealed coded conversations. In one, a suspect allegedly told another, "The street is safe, but the wolves are watching." Reporters clung to this quote, repeating it over and over. Speculation grew that wolves might have been a reference to undercover agents already closing in. If true, it meant the cartel had known they were being hunted long before the raid, but chose to stay anyway, daring authorities to make a move. Boldness of such a choice only fueled theories about betrayal within their own ranks. Had someone tipped off investigators? One suspect reportedly screamed during questioning, "Who sold us out?" Though officials refused to confirm any details, the suggestion of an inside trader electrified the story. Betrayals within cartels were not uncommon, but if one of their own had handed information to the FBI, it meant even the cartel's inner circle wasn't safe from collapse. Back in the neighborhoods, the fear lingered. Children were kept indoors. Schools sent out letters assuring parents of increased security, and some families packed up and left entirely. One teacher described how her students whispered about the raid at recess, some saying their parents warned them never to walk near certain houses again. The innocence of childhood collided with the harsh reality of crime, leaving scars that would outlast the headlines. By the end of the week, the case had become the state's obsession. Talk shows debated whether Georgia had become a new hub for international trafficking. Callers flooded radio programs with their own theories and stories. One caller claimed he had worked in construction and once renovated a house that was later raided, saying he always felt something off about the place. Whether true or not, his story added another layer of mystery. Everyone seemed to have a piece of the puzzle, but nobody had the full picture. And still, the symbol of that raid, the grenade launcher, haunted everyone's imagination. It wasn't just a weapon, it had become a metaphor, a reminder that the fight wasn't just against drugs or money, but against the idea that cartels could transplant their methods of war into American suburbs, with indictments unsealed, suspects in custody, and communities divided. The stage was set for even greater revelations. As reporters wrapped up their nightly broadcasts, they all asked the same chilling question. If this was just the beginning, what darker truths were still waiting to be exposed? Days turned into weeks. The case refused to die down. Every new headline seemed to add fuel to the fire, and every detail pushed the community deeper into shock. People who had once waved casually at their neighbors now looked at each other with suspicion. The raid had peeled back the illusion of safety, leaving behind a scar that would take years to heal. Court hearings began, and with them came the kind of drama that felt scripted for television. Inside the courtroom, relatives of the accused sat in silence, their faces tight with grief and anger. Outside, protesters shouted for justice, some demanding the harshest sentences possible, others insisting the suspects were scapegoats. Emotions ran high, and security was forced to keep the two groups separated. One heated exchange between a suspect's aunt and a local resident turned into a screaming match. The aunt shouted, "He's not a monster, he was tricked," to which the resident snapped back, "And what about the kids who could have died from those pills?" Cameras caught every second, and the footage replayed endlessly on evening broadcasters laid out the evidence in detail. They spoke of wiretaps that caught coded messages, of surveillance footage showing late-night exchanges, and of ledger books filled with transactions that stretched into the millions. Every time a new piece of evidence was revealed, gasps echoed through the courtroom. One prosecutor read aloud a message allegedly sent between members of the ring. "The fire is lit. The streets are ready." The words hung in the air, chilling in their simplicity. Were they describing shipments? or a plan to unleash violence if cornered? No one knew for sure, but the ambiguity only heightened the drama. Defense attorneys countered with their own theatrics. They argued that the prosecution was weaving a fantasy to shock the public, using words like grenade launcher to inflame fear. One attorney even claimed the launcher was a relic, a piece of scrap metal incapable of firing. The claim sparked laughter in the gallery, but it also planted seeds of doubt. Could the weapon have been exaggerated? Was the story being twisted for headlines? The clash between narrative and reality kept everyone on edge. Meanwhile, whispers of betrayal within the cartel grew louder. Rumors spread that one of the arrested men had turned informant, secretly cutting a deal with investigators in exchange for protection. Though no names were confirmed, tension among the suspects was palpable. During one court recess, two men exchanged glares so fierce that marshals had to step between them. Observers said it felt like a scene straight out of a gangster film, where loyalties fracture under pressure and everyone fears the knife in their back. Outside the legal proceedings, families were unraveling. Some relatives distanced themselves entirely, ashamed to be connected to the accused. Others stood by stubbornly, insisting their loved ones were victims of circumstance. One wife sobbed into cameras saying, "He promised me we'd have a better life. I didn't know what he was doing." The clip spread online, drawing both sympathy and scorn. Commentators dissected every tear, some calling her a victim, others labeling her complicit. The court of public opinion was as brutal as the courtroom itself. And yet, even as arrests were made and evidence piled up, the larger shadow remained. The cartel bosses across the border were still free, still calling shots from afar. Federal agents confirmed that indictments had been unsealed against them. But capturing them would be a different battle altogether. In Mexico, these men were said to rule towns with fear, using not just guns but entire arsenals of drones, explosives, and mercenaries. One official admitted, "Removing them is like cutting the head off a hydra. Another one grows back." The statement spread across media platforms, painting a grim picture of the fight still ahead. Georgia, once considered just another southern state, now carried the stigma of being a trafficking hub. Pundits debated endlessly. How had it come to this? Some blamed weak border control. Others pointed to corruption, while a few insisted the demand for drugs within American cities was the real root. No matter the angle, everyone agreed on one thing. The grenade launcher had become a symbol, a haunting reminder that the line between organized crime abroad and peaceful life at home had been crossed. One of the most dramatic turns came during a late-night press conference. Officials announced they had seized millions in cartel cash moving through a money services business in Norcross. Within 24 hours, entire stacks of bills, more than anyone could count by hand, were displayed on long tables. The sight stunned reporters. One anchor described it as an ocean of dirty money. To the public, it was another twist in a saga that felt endless. But behind the money and weapons were the human costs. Families in Athens and Atlanta confessed they no longer let their children play outside. Schools increased security. One teacher described her students' fear, saying, "They talk about flashbangs and guns the way they used to talk about cartoons." Innocence had been stolen, replaced by the echo of raids and the sight of men in chains. As the trials continued, betrayals multiplied. One suspect allegedly pointed fingers at another during questioning, sparking a ripple of anger that spilled into the courtroom. "You set me up," one man shouted before marshals dragged him out. The outburst made headlines, adding yet another layer of drama. Viewers watching at home couldn't get enough. It was as if the entire case had turned into a reality show, complete with villains, victims, and cliffhangers. In the end, the raid itself became a legend. Neighbors told and retold their versions of events, each story growing more dramatic with time. Some claimed they saw agents dragging out crates of explosives. Others swore they heard suspects shouting threats in Spanish. The truth was blurry, but the fear was real, and so was the spectacle. Through it all, one question never left the public's mind. If this was what authorities had uncovered, how much more was still hidden? How many more houses? How many more weapons? How many more quiet streets were hiding secrets waiting to explode? The saga of the Georgia cartel ring wasn't just about 17 arrests or one terrifying grenade launcher. It was about the uneasy realization that no place, no matter how peaceful it seemed, was safe from the shadows creeping in. And that realization left the community and the nation holding its breath, waiting for whatever revelation might come next. As the dust settles, the questions remain. Yes, 17 suspects were dragged out in handcuffs. And yes, the weapons and cash were paraded in front of cameras. But did that really mean the story was over? Behind bars or not? Whispers say there are still others lurking in the shadows, waiting for their chance to rebuild. And that grenade launcher, now locked away as evidence, has become more than just a weapon. It is a symbol of how close an ordinary neighborhood came to being transformed into a war zone. Families are still shaken. Parents tuck their children in at night, but glance nervously at the windows, remembering the flashbangs and shouting. Neighbors replay the events in their minds, wondering how many red flags they ignored. The courtroom battles continue, with emotions boiling over, accusations flying, and families divided between shame and defiance. The saga has left scars that will not fade anytime soon. But the biggest question is for you. What does it mean when international cartels can plant their roots so deep into small-town America? Is this an isolated case, or the beginning of something bigger? Are the communities we believe are safe truly prepared for what lies beneath the surface? We may never get all the answers, but one thing is clear. The line between peace and chaos is thinner than anyone imagined. And the moment the headlines fade, the fear still lingers. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think these arrests made Georgia safer, or are they just scratching the surface of a much larger threat? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next explosive story. Your voice matters, and this conversation is just beginning.